Hello and welcome to Venice Bike Social and the latest episode in our Better Riding series powered by Honda Motorcycles UK. This is the series with all the tips and advice on how to ride your motorcycle better than ever. And joining me, as always, is our expert motorbike coach. It is Mark McVeigh. And here he is. Hello, Mark.
G'day, Mr. Man. How you going over there in sunny UK?
It really is sunny. I don't think we've seen rain in months, but all the better for riding motorbikes in.
I'm jealous.
So, Mr. McVeigh, what are we learning about today?
Well, kind of cool. We've got a new series, 6 episodes, and we're going to talk about off-road adventure riding for road riders. But, rather than all the wheelies and skids, well, we might do a few, but we're going to focus on real-world training drills. And the goal is transform, road riders' off-road game, but, still keep it fun.
Cool. This sounds right up my street. I always think the more practice is better with off-road. And I always think that after about 3 minutes of off-roading, if I haven't fallen off, I must be some kind of superhero. And then I go, and then the bike moves and I wee my pants. Anyway, so where do we start?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head. And, at the risk of being boring, the first episode, we're going to talk about slow speed. And, to become a better adventure rider, you have to learn to ride slowly first. That really exposes, weaknesses that speed hides. And, often the biggest kind of missing foundation is balance. At our adventure off-road training and tours that we run here in Australia, we see riders kind of fall over, rather than crash. It's such a big thing, like we've got this guy here and, I'll just run that back because it kind of will probably catch people out. But you just see there's no kind of movement of the bike, he just kind of falls over. And it's really kind of like a fundamental balance issue. We've got the road coming from road riding, jumping onto often, a big 250 kilogram bike. And, you're riding on tarmac, the bike feels stable, easy. Then you hit the gravel, you hit the mud, you hit the sand or the rocks, and just suddenly everything changes. That bike starts moving underneath them. And that's just highlights. It's just fundamental balance is that kind of issue.
How does one develop fundamental balance? That fella there, it didn't seem to hit anything. It just kind of was riding along. There was no crevice or bump or it just...
Yeah, it was clay on the front, but, you need to have that balance to catch it. And, we talk about, the BMX bandits, if you're young enough to or old enough. We grew up on BMXs or mountain bikes or dirt bikes. And really, you've got that hidden advantage because there's years of standing up and doing skids and jumping and, balance and letting that bike move underneath you, if that makes sense. And, that builds like just thousands of, subconscious balance corrections, if you like. And we talk about that going into your kind of movement library, which transfers, directly into motorcycling.
We didn't realise what the consequences were, did we, when we were hooning about on BMXs and mountain bikes, regardless of the type of surface we were riding on. But what if you missed that in your childhood? Is there something that can work for your advantage?
Yeah, well, it is trainable, and obviously we looked at the mountain bikes there, but, dirt bikes are a great thing. And the thing to look at, if we look at this rail is, look at the center line of the bike and then look at the rider. You can see, the rider's kind of moving around and trying to adjust his position. The wheels are out of line. The rider's not on the center line. The bike constantly balancing and, moving, the bike moving underneath. So, the more repetitions that you do for that, basically, the lower the consequences and the faster the learning, but you got to practice. That's the key thing, right?
Why, and this is a question from the heart and the head for me, but why exactly this is a $1 million question perhaps, why do road riders struggle off-road?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And if you think about, if you're riding on tarmac, you've kind of got that grip and the stability and I guess the predictability, they're the kind of key things. Off road, you start getting the tires moving around, the traction changes, you've got gravel, ruts, rocks, sand, mud, all those things, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it it all goes through your head, doesn't it? And your eye line starts going down. But and then we kind of, I guess, worry a lot. What happens to the when the bike starts moving around
Exactly,
to us, to
100%.
road riders?
That's 100%. You're on the money there. Well, the riders interpret that movement as danger, so they tense up, they grip the bars, they're looking down, they're dabbing their feet. So essentially they're fighting the motorcycle, and that just makes everything worse.
What should we do instead? What are the keys?
Let it move,
Found
let
that
the
sort of
bike
wise.
move. So, off-road movement is normal. The front tire deflects and the rear sideways, the bars are dancing around, which we'll see. And, your job isn't to stop, every movement. It's to stay balanced and let that bike move underneath you.
So riders start developing that feel.
Yeah, exactly. And you develop it faster because, the feedback, from the tires is amplified. So if you think about it, and you go on the track, I was racing for like nearly 40 years, and to get a road bike or tire sliding, it requires a big load, and that's a lot of risk, and and normally speed, and normally you'll only get that on a racetrack. You can't do that on the road. And so on dirt, then the tires moving about at much lower speeds and kind of lower grip levels. So you can kind of get the feel for that, and the slip, the weight transfer, suspension moving around, wheel spin, and then eventually you kind of start to react subconsciously, and that's real machine control, right?
Because I guess from practically, for me, again, I speak from experience. I'm familiar with riding on a machine with an engine, or as was the case this morning, a battery, because I rode the Honda WN7 to the office.
Nice.
Anyway, point is, I'm used to riding. I'm familiar with riding on the road on tarmac with the same kind of surroundings, and then all of a sudden you go off road, and the whole thing's alien. There must be kind of practical steps for developing that feel off road, is there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's kind of, just going back to basics. When the riders coming, to the school, often it's the first time they've ridden off road. So they're kind of like a deer in the headlights. So, it's just focusing on the basic principles, to get them comfortable. And, first one's your vision. If people get worried, they kind of look down, and the head's dropping. So we don't want you looking at the front wheel or the rock right in front of you. This is what happens. They get that kind of target fixation, right? And that then, troubles the balance as well, because your balance is in your ears, right? So keep your head up and your eyes forward. Look at where you want to go. It's the old cliche, but it definitely works, when riders are fearful, they kind of tend to look down and, stare at the front wheel or the rock in front of them. So it's the old cliche, look where you want to go. And, that vision drives the balance and, your line. So vision, big thing. And then clutch is probably something that, road riders struggle with, because, you kind of go off at the lights and then you kind of don't touch the clutch anymore when you're rolling on a motorbike these days. But, the clutch is a massive thing for off-road. The throttle makes the power, but the clutch kind of meters it, if you like. So often we're slipping the clutch, we're holding it in the friction zone, and especially at slow speed, that kind of gives you precise control when you're going really slow. And you use it everywhere off-road, rocks, climbs, creeks, ruts, everything. So that's a big thing to think about. And then rear brake. So dragging that rear brake against a bit of clutch in the friction zone, that really kind of helps the bike's stability. It works against the drive of the engine. So if you think about, throttle, normally we go double engine idle. So, if your idle's 15, normally you're about 3,000. And that's a bit of a cheat, because the engine's spinning and then it makes the bike more stable. So at slow speed, it's less wobbly. And then the other thing that helps with is flame out, especially on single cylinders. The bike kind of at low revs and you have a bit of load, it conks out and then the rider falls over. So I've seen it so many times. So revs up, okay, and then people kind of get a bit startled. Oh, the bike's revving, oh, So it takes a bit of practice to kind of go, okay, that's fine that it's revving, and constantly going revs, revs, revs. So that's a big one. And then clutch in the friction zone and rear brake, and then blend the all three together. And that's a real technique that we'll talk about in these drills. And then the other thing is, your hips, don't hold yourself up with your arms. You got your legs there to kind of grip the bike. That's a big thing. And use your core. Keep your upper body relaxed and let that bike move underneath you. So that does heaps of things, keeping your grip light and your elbows loose, if that makes sense. And then one that is quite serious is the dabbing. People put their foot down, and on a 250 kilogram adventure bike, I saw a guy the other day, big spiral fracture in his leg. Bike slid, put his foot out, boom, and it wasn't going that quick. So it's really important. People kind of try and substitute for balance and put their leg out. We don't want them to do that. Keep your feet on the pegs, and even if you do fall off, then it's better than having your legs sticking out. So that's really kind of the key thing before we kind of move on to some drills.
Mark, there's an awful lot to bear in mind with all that, but those tips sound fantastic. You must, I know you must have got some drills that we can practice.
Yes, we do.
Skills, right?
We do. Practice, 20 hours to get your license, thousands to mastery. And, it doesn't, it's not, there's nothing more important than the off-road side. So we got heaps of drills. So let's hook in and we'll do a bit of analysis here. So basically the first thing to do is, with the slow speed is basically riding in a straight line. And like I said before, we've got if you look at, what we're trying to do here, we've got, the elbows nice and loose, 90 degrees to the steering stem as much as you can get there, rather than have your death grip. Obviously your rear brake's on the other side, but it's, if we play this through, you'll hear the revs. So, this is quite a rough, you can see it's all rocky and rough there. So really important. This kind of view shows the head up, the vision, looking, where you want to go. You can see the amount of steering inputs that I'm having to do here. Things wobbling all over the place. But just having that throttle, double idle, try and keep it there, clutch in the friction zone and dragging that rear brake and keep practicing that. And, guys can almost stand still. People that are more skilled than me can almost keep still when they're doing that, So you just practice.
Mark, physically, where are you sort of feeling it? Are you feeling it in your core?
Yeah, 100%. So the legs are kind of gripping the bike to a degree, especially when you're standing up to try and support your body there, and then just that kind of load comes through the core that you can kind of relax your arms as much as possible. A bit tricky when you're standing up. And it's hard to go slow. If you can ride slow, you can really ride a bike. It's one of those things. So standing up's the next one in a straight line. You can see here, still standing up, you've got the vision, eyes forward, that's your balance. And you're just trying to engage that core on the rear brake. And it's one of the tricky things is, with the revs is not having too much rear brake because you can burn the clutch out. I've seen, seen people do that on big bikes, saying, oh, just be careful with the too many revs and dragging the rear clutch. And the next minute you get this smell, which is no good. So that's standing up. And then the next one is going right in circles. So I think when we did the slow speed on the road, we had a CB and I had it on full lock. So I was trying to get it on full lock here, but it was very tricky to get it on full lock. But if you can do that, then you're really gone. So that's it.
That's really good.
Yeah, and then when you come to a stop, this is, you could see there, it's not that as rough as it can be, but, plan where you're going to stop. That's a big thing. You see riders and they kind of pull up and then they look at the terrain, but it's too light and they get their foot down and there's a big rut or something there and they kind of fall over.
Well,
So
you talked about it earlier on about keeping your eyes up and looking ahead, but and that, a lot of that's down to planning your route, isn't it? Planning the next sort of, well, as far as you can see, just in terms if there are any ruts or rocks or hazards. But yeah, I didn't really kind of comprehend the fact that you also need to plan where you're going to stop as well.
yeah, it's a big thing. We see the riders come up and, especially when we're doing like you do like a corner man system where, so people don't get lost. And then every kind of, 15 minutes you pull up, everybody gathers up. And then there's always somebody that falls over. Normally a shorter rider like me, but yeah, I've done it too many times to do it again. So yeah, so that's some good drills for the riders to practice.
Very fascinating, and it's been a very, very interesting episode. Pat, is it possible to summarize it all in one go?
Yeah, well, it's kind of the old story, Michael. 20 hours of training to get your license versus thousands of hours, practicing the correct techniques for mastery. And that's what it all boils down to.
It's a simple story, isn't it? The
It
more you
is.
practice, the better you're going to be, or the more you practice the correct techniques, the better you're going to be.
Exactly.
Fantastic. What's the next episode all about in this adventure riding series?
Yes, so it's going to be why we stand up when we're off road. So looking forward to that one.
Very good. Excellent. All right, sir. Thank you for that. I'll leave you be, and I'll say cheerio to our good viewers and leave them with a couple of messages.
No worries, Michael. See you next time.
Good. Thank you for staying this far. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Honda Motorcycles. And in the meantime, don't forget to check out all of the other episodes in our Better Riding series. I will put the playlist link in the description below or in the comment section below. So a couple of other things to tell you about. You can give us your thoughts, comments, experience, advice. Put them in the YouTube comments, or better still, come and find us at our own social media site. It's called Bennett's Bike Club. And the first rule of Bike Club is that we do talk about it. It's completely free. You'll just need an email address to sign up. There's about 2,500 people in there at the moment, and a whole host of experts to answer any questions you might have about off-road riding, suspension, tires, oil, whatever. And also, why not become a Bike Social member, which entitles you access to over 300 different motorcycle apparel, clothing, and training discounts. Just search for Bike Social membership. It's free if you insure your motorcycle directly with Bennett's. Otherwise, £6 a month, £60 a year. Thanks again. See you next time. Honda Motorcycles are supporting this series because safety is one of their key business pillars, and their quest for safety inspires their innovations in products, technology, and education, which is why they're committed to achieving zero traffic fatalities involving Honda mobility products worldwide by 2050.